Hello and welcome. This is Angie with thecountryshootcottage.net. So I've been doing a few things with sublimation crafts lately, and I wanted to jump back and do a video on exactly what is sublimation for those of you that might be beginners. So sublimation, the technical term sublimation, means going straight from a solid to a gas without passing the liquid stage. So in the case of crafting, what we're talking about is dye sublimation. So it's basically transferring the dye from the paper as a solid, so the ink is a solid, to a gas, which then bonds with the fiber in certain fabrics. So let's talk about what you need to accomplish that. So first of all, I have a video on turning an Epson printer into a sublimation printer. You do need special ink and special paper, both of those. So you can't just buy sublimation paper and run it through your inkjet printer that has regular ink. You need sublimation ink in order to make the process work. So special paper and special ink, and then you get a sublimation print that you can then apply to fabrics. So a couple of things you need to make sure of. First of all, you need to make sure that the design is mirrored, because you're going to place this down onto your surface and you're going to use heat and pressure to make the sublimation process happen in order to transfer this design from the paper onto the shirt. The other thing I always talk about, so the colors in this are super muted. So this was the same print that I used to make this, not exactly the same, but I printed one like this and made this shirt. So you can see that the colors get super vibrant once they're pressed. So when people get a sublimation printer and they print something out, they're worried because, you know, the blacks look gray, like everything looks washed out. That's because the process has not happened yet, and once that process happens and the chemical reaction takes place, then it will be nice and bright and pretty, just like you expect it to be. And then once the reaction happens, this is permanent on this shirt. So what happens is the ink sublimates into a gas and then it permanently bonds to the fibers of the fabric. The catch is that it needs some polyester content in order to make that reaction happen. So what I recommend always is at least 75% polyester content. I've heard like 75 to 85%. I've heard some people recommending 65%, and I think that's a little too low personally. So I would say 75 to 85% minimum polyester content of the material you're putting it on. If you can go like 100% polyester, even better. Right, so you will need to find polyester blanks. Now, that's for fabrics. There are a whole wide variety of sublimation surfaces on the market, and I have a whole video on that, and I'll link to that below as well. That way you can look at basically surfaces like mugs that are coated with a sublimation coating that then makes them able to do the chemical reaction and accept that ink and make that permanent bond. Now, because it is a permanent bond, this is one of the best things that you can do to make a design on fabric. So super detailed designs, you can print, you know, any color you can imagine, of course, because it is a printer. And then once it bonds to the fabric, it's not going anywhere. So it's super permanent, but it is fairly expensive to get into. So you're talking its own printer. So this printer I changed to a sublimation printer. I can't use it for anything else except the sublimation, the special ink, the special paper. So it is fairly expensive to dive into, which makes it something that usually people that are making shirts to sell dive into sublimation. Whereas if you're just making shirts, you know, one or two for yourself, you'll probably make those a different way, like heat transfer vinyl or something like that. But by all means, if you just have the money and want to dive into sublimation, by all means do that. It is a really fun craft project. But if you don't have the money to invest in like the sublimation printer and all that type of thing, infusible ink from Cricut is a version of sublimation that makes sublimation affordable and accessible to the everyday crafter. And I do have a full video on it, and I will link to that below as well. So you can also give that a try on your polyester fabrics. And it is also a way to kind of try out sublimation without making a huge investment. So that's another way to look at infusible ink. So you can do infusible ink sheets, markers, and they also make, Artistry makes some sublimation markers. You can try any of those on those polyester fabrics to get a feel for how sublimation works. Okay, so now we've talked about kind of some of the benefits and drawbacks, but I did want to note that sublimation works best on light colored fabrics. You see I put it on white here because it is basically see-through once you add it on. So the color of the shirt would come through whatever that you put it on. Now, there are some workarounds for that. I'll be covering some of those. But if I was wanting to make a shirt on dark fabric, like I wanted to make a black shirt with a design, just straight sublimation like this print out of my sublimation printer would not be ideal. I would need to take another step in order to put that on that dark shirt. So just be aware of that when you're sort of choosing what method you want to use to make your shirts for your business or for your hobby. That is one other thing to be aware of. So hopefully this helps answer that question of what is sublimation. Had quite a few questions about that and I wanted to get those addressed. If you have any further questions about sublimation or what it is, please feel free to drop down in the comments section and ask away. If you liked this video, if it helped explain it for you, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have videos every week and you don't want to miss any of those. And I thank you so much for joining me this week and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.